Hey guys, what is going on? Hope you guys are doing well today. Elliot here and welcome back to The Fragrance Well. So today's topic, we're going to be focusing on some more fall fragrances. We're in the thick of fall. Fall is rolling in. It's not in full effect just yet. So, that's what most of these videos are going to be focusing on right now. But in particular, I wanted to focus on fresh fall fragrances. In other words, fragrances that work in fall temperatures, but they have a fresh quality to them. I think now is really a good time to focus on that because we're in early fall, meaning for most of us, Florida's kind of an outlier. It's always warm here to some degree. But for most people, you're still getting warm weather. You're still getting warmer temperatures, at least in the high point of the sun being at the top of the sky. It's still warm out. It's not completely cool just yet all the time. So you still might find yourself pulling out some fragrances that have warmer weather qualities to them, freshness being probably the most obvious one. So that is today's video topic. I've got 9 fragrances here that can work in fall temperatures, but they also exhibit a freshness to them. Before we get started, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you do like the content, and remember, hit that bell icon so you can be notified when I upload new videos. Let's get into it. Alright, so the first one is coming from the house of Givenchy. We have got Gentleman Intense. Givenchy's Gentleman Intense. Let me say, man, sometimes I forget about this one. I wore it so much when I first got it that I intentionally kind of put it aside to give other fragrances somewhere, but I still love this one. Still a big fan of the Gentleman line in general. If you know anything about Gentleman Intense, Eau de Toilette Intense, sorry, is kind of the full name. If you know anything about it, it is a slightly fresher take on the Iris-based DNA of the newer Gentleman fragrances, i.e. the 2017 re-release of the Gentleman line from Givenchy. This one still has quite a bit of creaminess to it, quite a bit of richness to it, quite a bit of sweetness to it. So once again, it's an Irish fragrance, but it's just brightened up quite a bit compared to the other flankers in the line. In my opinion, the Eau de Toilette is actually the freshest version. So that one could actually work in warm temperatures, probably better than this one can, or at least, you could spray more of it and it may not be overwhelming. But this one here, I consider to be a transition fragrance. Has those qualities to it that can make it certainly work in cooler temperatures, especially early fall, and also can work in springtime when kind of the same thing is happening. It's starting to warm up, but it's not completely warm yet. So this one is a good, fresh, but fall-oriented fragrance in my opinion. So once again, from the house of Givenchy, we have got Gentleman Eau de Toilette Intense. All right, so the next one is coming from the house of Amouage, and we have got Reflection Man. Amouage, Reflection Man. Reflection Man in general can pretty much work year round. I mean, it's a very versatile fragrance from the house, one of the most versatile ones. Very popular fragrance. It's a slightly spicy, sweet floral fragrance. Has some dried woods in it, some light aromatic qualities to it, but primarily it's floral and sweet. Great, classy gentleman's fragrance that, like I said, can work year round, but that means it's certainly a great choice for the fall, and because it is more of a fresh fragrance more than anything, even though it can work in cooler temperatures, it makes a great addition for this list in my opinion. So yeah, Reflection Man, year-round fragrance for me, but definitely can work for this topic of discussion, fall fragrances that have a fresh quality to them. So once again, from the house of Amouage, this is Reflection Man. Moving on, coming from the house of Bond number 9, this is Lafayette Street. Bond number 9's Lafayette Street. Unfortunately, this is a tester bottle, so I don't have a cap. It is what it is. But this fragrance is actually the fragrance that prompted this topic for me. Wore this, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 days ago as my scent of the day. And that's kind of what made me think of it. It was a mostly warm day, but it was definitely cooler temperatures throughout the day. So I was experiencing both while wearing the fragrance. And I thought to myself, hey, this is really a very floral, somewhat fruity. It's a artificial fruitiness, but fruity and floral fragrance with a lot of sweetness, some really deep, rich vanillic, sweet-like notes, and also I think some tonka bean as well. And it also has a lot of ambroxan. Ambroxan is one of those things that can work for any temperature, really. And the way the sweetness comes across makes this a great option for the cooler months as well. But it retains that fresh quality for most of the wear of the fragrance. When you kind of get into the deep dry down, it's pretty much mostly vanilla at that point. But it still even then has a slight fresh quality. So this is a fresh fragrance that can certainly work for the fall temperatures. It's primarily thought of as more of a springtime fragrance, even though it is year round, but the notes alone come across as like a really good springtime fragrance, but I think it can work for the fall as well. So once again, from the House of Bond number 9, this is Lafayette Street. All right, next up, we got one from the House of Mancera. This is Aoud Lemon Mint. Aoud Lemon Mint from the House of Mancera. So this one, it's a pretty popular fragrance from the house. I imagine many of you out there do have this or have at least experienced it. And if you know anything about it, this is definitely a fresh fragrance, but it has a lot of deep, rich notes accompanying it. Starts off with this, really bright, kind of sparkly, sweet, spicy lemon accord. It's thickened up a little bit with an almond note. You do have kind of a candied mint, so that's lending to the mint flavoring of this fragrance. But it's supported with some really rich vanilla, has some nice leathery undertones to it as well. There is kind of a medicinal oud, which is, common in some of these Mancera fragrances. But it's not funky or anything like that, but it definitely has that kind of thicker quality to it. And therefore, the fragrance actually is quite rich and can even be a little too much in some higher heat temperatures. So like in the summertime, I would suggest going lighter on the sprays with this, but for fall, especially early fall, this is perfect. It's like this fragrance was made exactly for that time of year. Great springtime fragrance, great fall fragrance, particularly when you're early in those transition periods. This fragrance still kind of holds a place of being unique in my collection. I have yet to really come across another fragrance that smells like this. So I give it nods for being something that is different. But all that being said, great option if you want to go with something a little bit fresher in fall temperatures. So once again, from the House of Mancera, this is Aoud Lemon Mint. All right, we got one from the House of Hermes, and this is going to be Terre D'Hermes, the original Eau de Toilette. Terre D'Hermes. So this one here, I still think this fragrance is a classic. This one is, primarily a vetiver fragrance supported with some smoky flint accords to it. It's kind of thought of as like a dirty orange, just like the nickname for it, and I am pro for that nickname. So it has some nice citrus in the top of it, but it's primarily known for kind of having that earthy, dirty quality to it, from that flint and that vetiver mixing with the orange flavoring of it. But I gotta say, when I wear the fragrance, I get a fresh vibe from it. It's not necessarily thought of as a fresh fragrance, but it has freshness as a quality to it. So in my opinion, this one is easily a fresh fragrance that can work in the fall temperatures, because really those earthy, kind of, earthy, dirty notes that the fragrance has as its heavy base make it a great option for fall-like temperatures. So this one definitely has that fresh quality and can be worn in fall temperatures. It's primarily thought of as being a really kind of classy gentleman's office style fragrance. And I do support that sentiment. May not be my first choice for a date night fragrance, but if you're going out with someone you kind of already know and they like the scent DNA, hey, why not? Because I have met people who kind of randomly really think this smells just super sexy. So that kind of surprised me. But anyway, good, fresh, fall temperature fragrance option. Once again, this is Hermes's Terre D'Hermes, the original Eau de Toilette. Okay, so next up, got one coming from the House of Ormond Jane. This is Montabaco Intensivo. Montabaco Intensivo. See if you guys can see it a little better there. Anyway, this fragrance here is fantastic. It is my scent of the day today. So, I've kind of got this one fresh in my mind. This might be my most worn fragrances since any fragrance I've gotten kind of in the summertime. I got this, I think, kind of in the middle of summer. So out of all the fragrances I've gotten since middle of summer, I think this is my most worn fragrance. As you can see, there's already a little small dent in it. But anyway, this is honestly a year-round scent. So obviously it's another one that can work for fall temperatures in general, in my opinion, but because of the freshness, it's a good one for this list. It does kind of open up smelling mostly like just a cooling, fresh tea fragrance. Has some kind of cooling, spiciness to it, bit of an aromatic touch. There's lots of isogamma super in this, so it definitely has that cedarwood-like quality to it. But there are other notes in it that can make it work for the cooler temperatures. There's a little bit of tonka bean in this. There's obviously tobacco in it. The tobacco, in my opinion, does kind of come more to the forefront once the fragrance dries down a bit. But either way, with all that going on, it retains that freshness throughout the life of the fragrance wear. And another thing I noticed primarily today, and this is the first time I've actually worn the fragrance in any kind of cool temperature whatsoever. It wasn't cold today here, but we had cool temperatures. I noticed that the tonka bean comes out a little bit more when it is a little bit cooler. That could be because I've had the fragrance sitting for a while, so I might be tripping. But either way, I noticed more of the tonka bean more up front today than I ever have in any of my previous wears of this fragrance. So once again, from the house of Homme, this is Montabaco Intensivo. All right, this next one's coming from the house of Novatus Parfums. This is Eau Debonaire. Novatus Parfums, Eau Debonaire. So this one here, I'm gonna say right now, it's not gonna be for everybody because this one has a pretty prominent note of tuberose. And honestly, I'm not the biggest fan of tuberose myself, but when it's blended really nicely and there's a lot of other things that are, blending with it to where the tuberose is not the only thing I smell, I don't mind it as much. This fragrance kind of does that pretty well in my opinion, but this is going to be a very fresh and floral, kind of amber woody like fragrance. Along with the tuberose, you got some jasmine in here. There's quite a bit of lavender in this fragrance as well. Comes across as very classic, very debonair. Honestly, the name kind of lends itself to how it comes across. It is completely unisex though. So, that tuberose I think is kind of what makes that so. The base of this fragrance, to my nose, is primarily ambroxan and musk. Those are the two notes, and the way they come across really lends this to be a good cooler weather option as well. This is another one though that honestly can pretty much be worn just about any time of the year, and you adjust the sprays up or down. But this one certainly fits in this list because it is primarily coming across very fresh, but it has some richer amber woody like kind of sweet notes to go along with it. So this is another good option where if you want to wear a fragrance for the fall that has some freshness to it. Eau Debonaire. We'll get that done. Can't talk right now. Once again, from the house of Novatus Parfums, this is Eau Debonaire. All right, next one's coming from the house of Mason Francis Kirkjohn. This is Amyris Homme Extrait de Parfum. Amyris Homme Extrait de Parfum. I have talked about this fragrance quite a bit on this channel, but I have to say, this is pretty much the quintessential style of fragrance that kind of speaks to this category. A fragrance that can work in cooler temperatures, but retains a freshness to it. This is actually a concentration flanker. The original Amyris Homme was an eau de parfum. This is an extrait de parfum. And what they did, what Francis Kirkjohn did, was basically make a deeper, richer, sweeter, fuller version of an original fragrance. So you can almost say it's the cooler weather version of a already fresh fragrance. There's lots of saffron and cinnamon to this, so creating a fresh spice profile. You got some iris in this. Obviously there's amyris, which is kind of balsamic in nature. The sweetness in this fragrance coming from notes like vanilla and tonka bean. I would imagine that the original amyris still has those qualities as well. It's just ramped up a lot in this one, along with the addition of cinnamon. Cinnamon was not in the original, so they added cinnamon primarily to this to create an even warmer vibe. But the fragrance is still through and through a fresh fragrance. You're gonna smell overwhelmingly fresh more than anything for the life of the fragrance, but it has those richer, deeper notes to make it great for cooler temperatures. So I think this is a good one considering this category. So once again, from the house of Mason Francis Kirkjohn, this is Amyris Homme Extrait de Parfum. All right, and last but not least, coming from the house of Xerjoff, this is Uden Overdose. Xerjoff's Uden Overdose. So Uden being quite a popular fragrance from Xerjoff. This is also, I believe it's a concentration flanker. I'm assuming the original Uden is an eau de parfum. This is a parfum concentration. I don't own the original Uden. I have smelled it, but honestly, I'm not that familiar with it. I haven't worn it on my skin or anything, so I'm only really familiar with this one, but I do know that it is meant to be a richer, fuller, maybe even simpler take on the original fragrance. So this one does have some citrus-like freshness to it. Has quite a bit of tobacco flower. This one does have some coffee, of course, to it. Also has some ginger-like spices, quite a bit of sweetness to it, and primarily an ambery and musk base. I imagine, from what I've heard, compared to the original Uden, they do have a lot of similarities. This one is just simply fuller and richer and maybe a little bit simpler. But with all that being said, this is easily a fresh fragrance that has enough of a richness that can work in cooler temperatures. But again, it retains the freshness for the life of the fragrance. Because this, to me, is a pretty easy wear in warmer temperatures. You can overspray it because of how much of the rich sweetness that it has. But it could still work in the warmer temperatures. But it has enough of those deeper elements to work really good for the cooler temperatures as well, primarily fall and spring. So once again, from the house of Xerjoff, this is Uden Overdose. All right, guys, that is going to do it for this list. That was 9 fragrances that can be worn in fall temperatures but have a fresh quality to them. Let me know down in the comments below when we're kind of in that transition period and it's transitioning to fall, but it still is getting warm during the day. What's a fragrance you like to wear during that time of year? I appreciate you guys watching all the way into the end. Remember, be well and smell well, and I will see you in the next episode of The Fragrance Well. Have a good one.